with 3 billion gamers around the world, it's pretty much saying that, close to 50% of us play games one way or another. It's very difficult to make infrastructure sound sexy, right? To just a common user or a gamer. So in those 7 days, that managed to generate close to 350,000.
Hello and welcome to KryptosChain. My name is Claudio and joining me today is Nicholas from Ajuna Network. He's here to share everything about Ajuna, how awesome they're going to be when it comes to gaming, especially in the Polkadot ecosystem. So Nick, thank you very much for taking the time to join. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can get to learn more about Ajuna, because if anyone has been following this channel, I have been doing tutorials of Ajuna. I have been playing the Mogwai game as well, the early stages of it, which is the Ajuna avatars, but we'll hopefully learn more of what's to come. So Nick, thank you very much for taking the time to join. Because this is the first time you're on this channel, I need to ask you if you could please give us a bit of background about yourself, who you are, and then also when did you buy your first Bitcoin or Ethereum, or even was it even Bitcoin, or was it something else that you bought?
Hey, Claudio, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. And as you said, you've been probably following our tracks for quite some time. So yeah, my pleasure to be here to not only talk about sort of what we're doing now with Ajuna Network and how we see sort of gaming fitting into this whole, let's say, blockchain paradigm, but equally as exciting to me is why we chose to build in this ecosystem, which to me is at a very exciting sort of part of its life cycle right now. So personally, maybe sort of a bit of a background from myself. Initially, I studied economics and econometrics, sort of back in the, let's say, 2000s. Then I followed up that with quite a big interest in the pharmaceutical industry. So I did a master's in health management. And I think always what I found fascinating with that industry is that general economics is around this very simple principle of demand and supply, which assumes that people are rational, that we can make our own choices. Healthcare was a really interesting choice because there is a demand and a supply, but there's always an intermediary, right, which is the doctor, which changes completely sort of the economic model. I was actually lucky enough to be able to work both in a big bank, which was Deutsche Bank, and later on in GlaxoSmithKline, a big pharma company. And I saw both the good, I would say, and the bad of those both industries. And about a decade ago, maybe a bit more, I found myself back moving to Switzerland. I'm originally from Greece. So this was close to 2007, 2008. I had gone back to Greece to do my military service. And as probably quite a few people know, that was around a few years later when the economic collapse of Greece happened. And I was in the unlikely, let's say, position to be working as a head of foreign markets in a stock brokerage firm, which meant that when that crisis happened, we were the first to be hit. Still, at that point, I had no knowledge of obviously blockchain, not even Bitcoin, sort of was on my radar. But it was right after that crisis where there was an incident that happened in Greece, which really opened my eyes. And that was something called capital controls. What that essentially meant for us meant that for me as an individual, that I have my normal banking in sort of the bank I was using here in Greece, I was suddenly told that I could not get more than 50 euros a day out of my own account, which seemed completely sort of absurd. Who is this person who's controlling my money and is telling me that I have limits of how much I could take? So I would say that was the first time that I looked into Bitcoin, and immediately it looked like an answer to a real problem that we were facing at that point in Greece. But that was also the reason that sort of sent me over to Switzerland. My wife was working at that point in pharma. We found an opportunity and we went. And that was sort of the same time that my entrepreneurial, I would say, journey started in the, what we would say now, traditional Web2 companies.
Yeah.
And the first company I created was essentially a Netflix for fitness. It was just about the time that sort of Apple Watch and all of these devices were coming out, and I thought, hey, this is an awesome opportunity to be able to not only work out at home, but be able to track your progress. So it was a great initial experience, and eventually a few years later, this is about 6.5 years now, I deep dived into the blockchain and gaming space. So at that point, with a team of people that had worked in the past, we decided to create our own, I would say, solo chain. And the idea behind it was that we were trying to, so we used Solidity, right? So it was built on the basis of that. We wanted to make sure that it's on Solidity because that was the network of developers, right? Sort of the biggest network of developers were building on Ethereum and Solidity, but we also really liked the consensus algorithm, or the way that EOS at that point was going about it. We thought that it could be, we could make a more performant blockchain with a higher throughput and things like that. And that was a great experience. It was my first experience into the blockchain space. I got to see, I think, a lot of the good and interesting stuff and learn a lot, and also a lot of the bad side of it. But the biggest lesson I would say that I got from that experience was that we had decided to build outside of a community, which we never understood how big the impact would be. We thought we would be attractive to both Ethereum community and EOS. We ended up being attractive from none of them because they could not sort of understand. So on which side are you on? So I think the most sort of the biggest lesson is that we had underestimated how much tribal these different sort of ecosystems were at that point. So after this project essentially failed, as much knowledge as I had got out of it, I was starting to move outside of the space. And it was a few years after that Cedric, who's the founder of Ajuna Network, reached out to me in a rather traditional fashion through LinkedIn. He had seen sort of my background and said, "Hey, let's have a talk. It seems that you're quite interested in this space, both of gaming and blockchain." And very quickly, we seem to have the same sort of passion for the space, the same ideas of how gaming could act as this, I'll use a Greek term, the Trojan horse, right? Like a Trojan horse in order to be able to onboard a mass audience into blockchain.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was also super interested in what I was seeing going on in the Polkadot ecosystem. It seemed to me something fairly new, fairly exciting, but most importantly for me, it had a great core team, right? A team that had a lot of experience, not only building out essentially the Ethereum ecosystem, but it was constantly adding new people. So the whole endeavor sounded to me pretty exciting, and that's when a few years ago I joined Cedric and Andre,
Yeah.
and Ajuna Network, let's say, was born. So that's a bit of my, let's say, background into this space. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about my passion for gaming. Obviously, as a kid, I was from very young. I was always interested in these new devices coming out. I still remember my first Game Boy and Nintendo NES, and having, the cartridges that I would put in, and I would play the games. I would get bored with them. Then I would go at school, trade my game with another game. And so I was always, let's say, fascinated, but always what bothered me, to be honest, with gaming back in the day is that it was a very isolating experience, right? It was you in front of your TV without your mates. But suddenly around sort of the 2000s, everything started changing, right? Sort of the internet became a core element of gaming. Social part of gaming became huge. And suddenly it had become a way to connect with people from all over the world and have a shared experience through gaming. And I think that always from university, even moving on, it was always part of my life. And going back to that first experience when we tried to build that first solo chain that we did, our use case that we were going after even then was gaming, because sort of we exactly thought that this is, it has a lot lower barriers to entry, right? DeFi is a very intimidating first step into a new world. And so
Yeah.
we thought that gaming is sort of probably the easiest to go through. So combining those two things together for me came from trying to get back to that very simple experience of owning something and be able to trade it with friends. And it was as simple as that. And then this became even more to me important when, if you see sort of the gaming landscape right now, it's super user friendly, I have to say. It means that I can just sign up for a service like Xbox Game Pass, pay 10, 15, I don't know what it is, dollars a month, and get access to a huge library to play. But the fact is, I own nothing. If I stop paying for the service, I'm done. I have nothing sort of to show for it. And I think a big part of gaming is ownership. And what I mean by that is, or sort of that value that is created. And value doesn't necessarily have to come with a price tag, right? Sort of the spending, let's say a month playing World of Warcraft to get your character to a level 60, that was value on its own. That was a goal sort of worth achieving. And so my goal here and sort of our goal here with Ajuna is how we can bring a lot of those old type of, I would say, feelings back into gaming. And at the same time, try to eliminate as much as we can at this point in this initial stage, the financial incentive to it, because I think financial incentive has to come quite a lot later when it comes to gaming. So that was, I would say, how my passion for gaming and how this beautiful new technology started to sort of blend together in my mind of how we can move forward.
So why did you decide to launch on Polkadot then? Well, let's say you started on Kusama first with Bayun, which is the Canary network. So why this ecosystem? Why Kusama and Polkadot?
It was really initially a technological, let's say, choice, and specifically, and the way that this was both explained to me and the way that I understood it, it goes back to the simple smart contract versus pallet. And it seemed to me that pallets would give us so much more power and opportunity to be both creative and try to do a lot more elaborate things around gaming. And because at the end of the day, and I'll sort of share a bit more information about Ajuna, one of the things that we're really interested to see how we can accomplish is to create an infrastructure or an environment where developers can choose to put both game logic and even a whole game engine on chain. And the reason why we think that is important is that I think one of the super interesting things about sort of blockchain is this idea of governance. So specifically for gaming, player governance or DAOs. But to have true DAOs or true governance, if you have the game engine in a centralized server controlled by a single entity, it doesn't matter what type of DAO you have. That entity can at any point just take the server down, game over, and we're just stuck in a governance DAO talking to ourselves. So that's a big goal of us, to be able to see how we can create those necessary sort of tools and infrastructure where it at least gives the option to developers to see what should reside on chain and what shouldn't.
So Ajuna is a platform for gamers to develop on top of, right? Basically, the core team is yourself, Cedric, and then you have other team members as well. But you guys, so the core team has actually developed the game called Battle of Mogs, or you are still developing it right now. It's in the early stages. And one of the first phases that you launched was the awesome Ajuna Avatars Season 1, which we got to test here. So one of the questions I have with regards to that is the lack of NFT technology in it. Like, what was the reason behind not using NFT technology? And do you plan to do so for future versions of Battle of Mogs or maybe the awesome Ajuna Avatars?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a great question. And maybe to take a step back to sort of share a bit of Cedric's path to Ajuna Network and Polkadot. So Cedric started, let's say, first deep dived into the blockchain space really early, around 2013, 2014, by doing Bitcoin mining. But eventually his mind, let's say, started spinning and thought, hey, wouldn't this be interesting if I could encode logic on the Bitcoin protocol? So he took the Satoshi part of the transaction to encode logic and essentially created a very simple lottery on the Bitcoin protocol. Now, obviously, that was something, let's say, from a regulatory perspective, which was completely illegal. But from his side, that already had sort of opened up that idea that, hey, blockchain could be used as an infrastructure, to put it sort of very simple, for gaming. So a few years later, he had started developing this idea of a game, which was Battle Mogs, and it was really inspired for his passion for turn-based games like Hearthstone. So Hearthstone was sort of the thing that he spent the most hours. He will tell you on his own he wasn't the best player, but his passion of reverse engineering everything, he created probably the most famous let's say, AI bot. He would probably have a much elegant term for it called Saberstone, which was initially sort of a way for him to cheat the system in order to sort of become the best player. That was his goal. That didn't work out, but sort of one of the really cool things about Saberstone is that eventually and still is used by universities and university students in AI to run different simulations on it. So what he did at that point, he started working on a protocol named Dash, which again was sort of quite interesting the way that they had set up their whole idea with master nodes, and essentially forked Dash in order to be able to launch Battle Mogs. Now, the problem that he found along the way is that sort of operating your own sovereign blockchain is really difficult. He spent most of the time trying to figure out how to protect the chain from 51 attacks and things like that, and didn't even have enough time to focus on the game. So that experience eventually led him to Polkadot, where it was answering exactly the problems that he was facing. Right? So essentially being a layer zero, telling us, hey, how about that you can run your own sovereign blockchain, designed the way for the purpose that you want, and you don't have to care for the trust and the security. So that value proposition on its own was clearly what led us towards the Polkadot ecosystem. Now, even sort of the second part that was really fascinating with us is that one of the really interesting value propositions was that there was essentially a test network called Kusama, and then the main network called Polkadot. And for gaming, for us, that sounded perfect because essentially when you want to launch a game, one of the big things that you have to do in the beginning is test it, right? Balance it, make sure everything works the way that you want it. So the idea that we could use Kusama as that sort of experimental environment where we can try different things, break some stuff along the way, just made a lot of sense for gaming. And that's why our choice, as a lot of other parachains initially, was, hey, we start with Kusama. That's where we can launch and start doing our own little experiments, and eventually go to our, I would say, enterprise level solution, which would be the Polkadot, launching on the Polkadot chain.
What's going on with the NFTs part? Because I'm still curious.
Sorry, yes, you asked me about the NFTs, and I went on a tangent. Yeah, so that was by design. So one of the things that we were noticing, as everybody was noticing in the past year or so, was that sort of this NFT market was exploding. It was really becoming quite interconnected with gaming, but it was the way that these NFTs were launched seemed very counterintuitive to gamers. So the way that we understood sort of NFT launches happening up to now is that there was a hype to create sort of an initial community. A team would create these NFTs. It would whitelist people who could participate. And once that launch happened, your first interaction with those NFTs was a financial one, right? I have to go in, pay, buy it, and then that sort of promises me certain things. What that NFT could promise me was from financial gains to experiences to different types of things. But that first interaction was a financial one. So it was, it was promising a value which would come in the future. But from gaming, we always sort of knew that that's sort of the reverse thing, how it happens. You start a game sort of with nothing, and eventually by the time that you end this game, you've created some value. Now that value could be that I got a sword, that could be my character, or it could be as simply the fulfillment that, I spent 10 hours in this experience and it was awesome, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we wanted to achieve with the Awesome Ajuna avatars. The question was, how can we essentially reverse engineer, right, the NFT launch, keep it as a game asset. Nobody cares about NFTs in gaming as a term, I mean, and essentially give the opportunity to users to create your own, let's say, NFT, your own game asset. And once you've created it and going through the game loop, there's sort of that sense of fulfillment, of achievement, and now I have it. Now, it's an on-chain asset because, as you also know, the Awesome Ajuna avatars are a fully on-chain game with all of its difficulties and horrible sort of user experience that I have to find a transaction for everything. But at the end of the day, we're putting you through a process that you can play a game, and at the end, you have a game asset. Now, that game asset, you can exchange it, right, in its own marketplace within the game. You own it 100%. It's on chain, but to this point, it's not an NFT. Our next step, right? So I'll talk a bit later about sort of what these seasons, the different seasons represent, but just sort of to give you the life cycle of what we're planning is that it starts with a game asset. Then the second part is that we're going to launch in a few months our second product, which is called Wildcard, which is essentially an off-chain worker with a team that we're working with Polycrypt from Germany, which will give the opportunity for you to tokenize, right, that sort of game asset, so make it into an NFT. And then that off-chain worker will allow you in a gasless way to be able to take it in and out of Ajuna Network, in and out of Polkadot into Ethereum and Polygon and back. So that's something which is really important. But we just wanted to make sure that first we get people to care about the game asset, and then we can give them the option to tokenize it and take it in and out of the ecosystem as they wish.
Now let's talk about the game itself. So Battle of Mogs. So how many seasons do you expect to have of Ajuna avatars before Battle of Mogs will be ready?
The way that we thought always of the awesome Ajuna avatars would be different seasons would represent different products or experiences which later on would be launching on either Bayun or later on Ajuna Network. So season one, as you mentioned, was designed around our own game Battle Mogs. So that would be sort of that entry point where we get to introduce our Mogwais and their characters and a bit of their lore and a bit of the things that we do. And essentially for the people who have played season one, and that would also hold true for season two, which I'll get to into soon, this ownership of that game asset, of that NFT, will give you access to the snapshots, which we're going to start releasing starting in December of this year, which we're going to release the first snapshot of Battle Mogs for players to be able to access. So the game development itself for the past year has taken a back step for us, right? In terms of us making sure that we had to focus on the infrastructure, right? That took a lot of our efforts last year. So getting our parachain set up, setting up our team, making sure that we can build out everything. Then we started moving on to the product layer, which is for us the most exciting part. And now is sort of that for the past few months, we started reworking again and preparing that first snapshot for Battle Mogs. So season two, which is going to be launching at the end of this month, that's where we're going to introduce then the missions, the Ajuna missions, where essentially all of these avatars that you can create through season 1, 2, and beyond, you will be able to take them on what we call on-chain adventures. And again, the on-chain adventures is a way for us in a very simple and sort of exciting way to introduce concepts like governance, like voting, like staking, but through a game, right? Staking as a term to a gamer is horrible and means nothing. But if you think about as a gaming, if I tell you, hey, take your awesome Ajuna avatar, go get a pilot license, because then you need to buy a spaceship and go stay 10 days on a planet, which essentially is staking, right? So stay in that planet for 10 days to do X, Y, Z, and then you're going to get the loot. It's staking, but by putting it through a gaming, I would say, by through the perspective of a game, we hope to introduce these much more different concepts in that way. So season two, the product that they will introduce is the missions. The most exciting part for us is what we announced just a few weeks ago at Decoded, where we have our first third-party partner who's going to be launching both a season and their own game. And we're really excited that it's the team from Everloot, which we know quite a few people in the ecosystem know them. They've been working, and I think they also went through the accelerator of Moonbeam. Really, really sort of great guys. They had a really good concept for a game, which is really using these primitives of Web3. And they're going to be launching their season 3, which is planned for November of this year. And following that, they're going to be launching their game on Ajuna Network. Which is pretty exciting.
So are they going to be then on Moonbeam and on Ajuna Network, two ecosystems?
So the game that they're going to be launching is on Ajuna. It's a new game that they're going to be.
Oh, a new game. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a new game, a new experience that they're creating, which is going to be launched exclusively on Ajuna Network. But obviously, as we have told them, and as sort of our ethos has been, is that anytime that we can find ways that whether these products or experience can be shared within the ecosystem, we will do it. So maybe to give you a hint of how we see parachains working together, at least in the experience that we are creating. I mentioned before those on-chain missions. So what we're looking forward to be able to create with other parachains is try to create missions where we're asking our users to go interact with these other blockchains. It can be simple, fun things. So for example, hey, how about go to this planet and try to find the educator, which is called, I don't know, Bill Lampoon. And you have to go and poke him and make sure that he gives you a bill coin. Or how about you have to go sort of to, again, sort of around narrative-based ideas, but giving them the opportunity to interact with other blockchains. We're having some really interesting discussions with Interlay to see, is there a place for Bitcoin, let's say, in gaming? And what would that represent? So we'll try those different experiments, which is a way that we can introduce, let's say, our users to other players or other parachains in the ecosystem, but also vice versa. Maybe users from other ecosystems to get explore what it is that we are building.
That's really good to hear. And collaboration is key to everything. And to be fair, and especially in the Polkadot ecosystem, where so many in the bear market has been so much focus on building and also collaborations, because when you get those integrations from different teams, you're all basically supporting each other, and that can help bring more users in the next bull market whenever it happens. And talking about users, I do have a question with regards to marketing. So what is Ajuna's plan to market the products, like the games? Because you should be marketing those games to maybe true content creators and also media firms, but not necessarily the crypto ones, but also the gaming ones, because you guys are creating games at the end of the day. So maybe you should be reaching out to those gaming communities. So what is your plan there? If you could please talk about that.
So here I can say, without any sort of problem, that I don't know exactly the answer, but what I can tell you is sort of the things that we have experienced and tried up to now and what we think works and doesn't. So initially, last year, as I said, we were building infrastructure. It's very difficult to make infrastructure sound sexy, right? To just a common user or a gamer. So we tried quite a lot to attract gamers, but I can say that we were very successful. And the ways that we were doing it was mainly through Twitter or sort of trying ourselves to share our own gaming experience. But I can say that we had a lot of success. And at some point when we made the decision that, or not the decision, when sort of that natural progression of a team moving from the infrastructure layer into the product layer, things started happening, becoming a lot more straightforward and easy. It's much easier to promote or market a product or an experience rather a general concept like sort of blockchain or infrastructures. And there we have been quite more successful. Now, another choice that we made quite early on is that we made that conscious decision that we were going to really lean in to the technology. And that means that we were going to use Kusama, and with its problems, with its limitations, with its horrible as a sort of user experience and slow things. But since we made that decision, we understood that our core audience is not a gamer. Our core audience is a token holder, right? A token holder, whether that's an Ajuna token holder or a Polkadot ecosystem token holder. And the question that we were trying to answer for them is, what can I do with this token, right? So what can I do in Polkadot? I can use it for staking. I can use it to participate in open governance. What else can I do? And we wanted to say, hey, look, you can use this token to come have play a small sort of on-chain game, right? And just give another use case for those token holders. Is that the core gaming audience? No, but with 3 billion gamers around the world, it's pretty much saying that, close to 50% of us play games one way or another. Now, in an ideal sort of scenario, as we move forward, we as a team keep focusing on these products and experiences on the technology. And as we attract new teams coming on, it's the team that's building a game who should be going for an audience. Maybe a good parallel that I can, and I really believe that, in historically to see the launches of gaming consoles, right, from Xbox and PlayStation, it's never the device that's going to sell units. It's the games. So usually when Xbox first came out, which it was the new player, the new kid on the block of the console work, they came out with Halo. It was Halo that sold those millions of consoles, right? It was God of War that's selling these things. So we hopefully can attract those game developers and teams who will build these experiences, which will attract
gamers,
sort of the larger gaming community.
Cool. Sounds interesting. Thank you for that. Now let's talk about some of the challenges that Ajuna has had, because there's no perfect project. Everyone faces challenges, in order to become successful and in order to create a product. So can you maybe give us maybe the top 2 biggest challenges that you had with Ajuna?
So with Ajuna, we started and we went really fast in the beginning. So we were, I would say, pretty successful both on the development side, starting working with the Web3 Foundation and getting a few grants in order to create that first Unity SDK that was sort of created by Cedric. Then we went into 2 fundraising rounds, which were very successful and very quick, and then immediately into trying to build up a team so we can set up the infrastructure. So the first challenge that we had, I would say, was that building out the team, right? So you try to hire the best people possible that you can find. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. So a big challenge for us, and that will constantly be a challenge which we will happily have to make sure that we can always attract the most talented and passionate people on our team. The second part that was sort of a real challenge is something that was quite common around the Polkadot ecosystem. How can we attract a community, right? When it's not there, right? There's not such a huge community like that we would come in and say, hey, now we're doing gaming, so all of you million of users come and flock to Ajuna. So that was a big challenge for us. And I think what I mentioned before, that sort of organic switch towards the application layer or the products starts making marketing or building a community a much more rewarding experience for us. We have sort of decided since last year that we have really one metric that we're interested in, and that's engagement, right? It's not sort of not even how many, it's how engaged. That's sort of what we're trying to focus on right now. And I think it's a good target to have and a good sort of North Star to follow, especially when it has to do with gaming. So team building and sort of attracting a community were the 2 biggest challenges I would say that we have faced.
Now I need to talk about the question of the bear market. So financial sustainability for the Ajuna team to hit those roadmap milestones and to continue delivering. How long in terms of time frame do you think the Ajuna team have until they need to find some sustainable income to be able to continue to develop aside from the funding that you got from the VCs so far? So how long can you sustain until the warning switch turns on and you'll have to find some way to generate that income?
Well, I think we have as I said, in terms of from the fundraising that has guaranteed us a very healthy runway, for the next few years to be able to sustain a team even without revenues. But as I mentioned earlier, the Awesome Ajuna avatars is the first way for us to start generating some revenues for the team. So to give an example, for season 1, which we ran in February of this year, although we had sort of planned it to run for about a month, it ended in about a week's time. Which was a good problem, let's say, to have, because that happened because we got about 1,000 players really engaged playing the game, and it reached sort of its end. So in those 7 days, that managed to generate close to 350,000 worth of 350,000 by you, which would be, let's say, the equivalent of, let's say, $20,000 to $30,000 from a very simple sort of 1-week game. So one of the things that we're looking for in season 2 is how can that sort of start scaling up. Ideally, we should have each season to be able to be run financially successful, not only for us, but also the teams that are launching, because that's when I think the value proposition of running a season of Awesome Ajuna avatars becomes a real alternative for game developers instead of going for fundraising. So a lot of those ecosystem funds, right, that are out there for Polygon, from Avalanche and these things, the way that they go about things is that they try to attract developers by giving them a grant. Hey, I'll give you 50,000 or 100,000, but there's a list of things that you have to do. Launch on my chain, ABC. So our goal is, if we can make a season of Awesome Ajuna avatars, being able to generate about that amount of money for a team, that's a great way for them to be able to kickstart the development of their game, kickstart their community without the dependency of funds from external, whether those are grants or even VCs.
But in terms of time frame, so how long can the team sustain without the Awesome Ajuna avatars, like from the VC funding alone? That's more what I'm curious about.
Okay, so the team, even with its current burn rate, which is highish, we would be able to sustain for at least 2 more years, but we're pretty sure that if we see that the signals of the market are that we're not getting out of the bear market, or that the products that we're creating are still not generating enough revenue, we can definitely sort of cut down that burn rate quite significantly. A
Okay.
big advantage you'll see from the founding team is that because we are all of us quite experienced, right, which we're quite thankful to have our successes in the past. We're pretty sure that if needed, we can extend that runway and still be full throttle. So I think that's one of the things that we've done really well is, as I said, when it was the time to fundraise, we did fundraise. When it's the time to cut down, we will cut down.
I do have one final question, but before I ask you that, which is not going to be related to Ajuna, it's just a general question. I need to ask you, what do you have to share regarding Ajuna that you're really excited to share? Like something that the users are really looking forward to.
So we shared the first big news of the third party game coming, but it doesn't end there. I think pretty soon you'll be able to hear from us an even bigger announcement about season 4 and a new game that's going to be joining us. So that's all that I can share right now, but it's something that we have been working on for, I would say, close to a year to be able to make this happen. And ideally, we'll be able to show it off at Sub-Zero. So that's the exciting news. Again, it will be an external studio with quite a lot of experience and successes behind it. And hopefully we'll get everything ready for Sub-Zero. But maybe another thing that I would like to share about Ajuna, and which is really exciting for us, is now that we're starting to work a lot more deeply with the ecosystem, and that's something that I personally am very excited about. So working with parachains, working with the other parachains who are interested in gaming, we're looking to create. I'm not going to call it a DAO. I will call it an alliance. I will call it a group of different parachain teams, which are passionate and want to add value to gaming. So that's something that we're pushing forward together as a unified, let's say, approach towards. And I think probably that is the most exciting part, not only for Ajuna, but for the ecosystem as a whole, in regards to that vertical of gaming and entertainment.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for sharing all of that. I hope people are going to be interested to learn more about Ajuna and obviously take part in these awesome Ajuna avatars tests that are happening, right? Because you're opening the floor to the whole community, mostly the Polkadot community, to jump in and be early and test all these different features. And I know that a lot of them also get, if they're early enough, they also get like free mints on certain occasions. I know that you've given those away as well earlier. So when you did season 1. So thank you for that. Now let's talk about the final question, and that's in relation to what is one thing in life that you truly desire. This doesn't have to be related to crypto, but just in general.
So as an individual, in 2010, after spending, I would say, close to a decade away from my country, like living in the UK, trying to study, to get some experience, my dream was always to be able to come back here in Greece and make a life for myself. That life took myself to Switzerland with my family, which I'm very grateful for. I think if I can manage at some point to create that perfect opportunity where I can have the life that I would like for myself and my kids and have it sustainable here in Greece, I still believe it's one of the most beautiful places to grow up for kids and have a life. So yeah, that's a personal goal for me, maybe for the future.
I've only heard good things about Greece. Everyone's talking about going on holiday there because of all those awesome islands like Zakynthos and all the other islands that you have, but also in Athens as well. Cool. Thank you very much, Nick, for taking the time to join. And thank you as well for watching this video. And if you want to check out Ajuna, I'm going to be posting links in the description of this video and also in the pinned comment. Also, make sure to follow Ajuna on Twitter because they are active there. They post a lot of their updates there. So if you want to stay up to date with all the future releases, then Twitter is the best place, but also Discord, right? You have a very active Discord community. So if you are on Discord, just make sure to join that as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.